Imagine standing in a quiet field at night, far away from any city. The sky above you looks calm and familiar. Stars shine like small lamps in a huge dark room. Everything seems simple, but this is only how it looks to our eyes. Space itself may be far more complex than we can see. Our world has 3 directions we can move in, but some scientists believe there might be more, hidden dimensions that we cannot sense at all. And if life depends on the shape of space, then maybe there are forms of life living quietly in these hidden places. To understand this idea, think of a fish living in a flat pond. The fish can move forward, backward, left, and right. It feels the water around it and the currents that push and pull. But it never knows the world above the surface. When a small insect skims across the top of the water, the fish does not see the insect itself. It only feels ripples. For the fish, the insect is not a creature, but a strange pattern on the surface. Now imagine that we are like this fish. We live in our 3-dimensional world, but something else might be moving through higher dimensions, leaving only gentle ripples in our space. Modern physics gives this idea room to exist. Some theories say the universe may have more than 3 dimensions. These extra dimensions could be curled up or hidden, too small for us to notice. They are not magical, they're simply out of reach, like a room in a house that has no door. But if such a room exists, what if something lives inside it? Something that naturally moves through those dimensions the way we move through ours. To explore this idea, we must let go of the assumption that life must look like the life we see on Earth. Life adapts to its environment. If an environment includes directions or forces that we cannot sense, then the living things shaped by that environment might behave in ways that seem impossible to us. Imagine a plant that grows into a direction we cannot see. To us, its shape would look strange, as if it appears and disappears or shifts for no reason. We would see only the part that enters our world, not the whole organism. Our perception is very limited. Our eyes see only a thin slice of the light spectrum. Our ears hear only a small range of vibrations. Even our best machines measure reality indirectly. They detect energy, motion, or tiny bends in space. If there were higher dimensional life, we might notice only the faint traces it leaves behind, like ripples on the pond that hint at something touching the surface from above. Some scientists study mysterious forces in the universe. One example is dark matter. We cannot see it, but it seems to pull on stars and galaxies with great strength. Many people believe it must be made of unknown particles. But another idea is that we might be feeling the gravity of something that exists partly outside our dimension, like a footprint pressed on a thin sheet from the other side. If life existed in these hidden dimensions, it might not be made of atoms like us. It could be made of patterns, shapes, or forms of energy that stay stable in their own space. To us, these forms might show up as repeating signals, sudden changes, or strange pulses, movements with no clear source. Just as bacteria were invisible until we built microscopes, higher dimensional life could remain hidden simply because we do not have the right tools to see it. This is not a claim. It is an exploration. If life can exist in higher dimensions, then our universe might be far more crowded and rich than we think. There could be entire ecosystems all around us, separated not by distance, but by dimensions we cannot enter. They might not know we exist, just as we do not know they exist. Before we go further, we must stay grounded. Dimensions are real features of the universe, and the more we learn, the more they suggest that our world is only one layer of something much larger. To move deeper into this idea, let's return to the simple image of the fish in the pond. Imagine that sometimes the fish feels a sudden push in the water, as if something brushed past, even though nothing is visible. To the fish, this is a mystery, but to us, it is easy to explain. A bird flew low, or a leaf touched the surface. The fish feels the effect, but never sees the cause. This is exactly how our universe sometimes behaves. We detect effects, small changes in gravity, strange patterns of energy, unexplained motions, without seeing what caused them. Scientists often face these invisible causes. They find clues that something might be interacting with our world from beyond the space we know. These clues are gentle, quiet, and easy to miss, like the faint ripples on the pond. But they are real enough that we must consider the possibility that something unseen is shaping our universe from a higher dimension. To make this easier to imagine, think of a shadow. A shadow is a flat version of a real object. It has only 2 dimensions, while the object casting it has 3. If you had only ever seen shadows, you would never guess the full shape of the real object behind them. A cube would look like a square, a sphere like a circle. Now reverse this idea. If something from a higher dimension passed through our world, we might only see the simple shadow of that thing, its lower dimensional trace. We would not see its full form. This means that higher dimensional life, if it exists, would not appear to us as a creature. It might look like a strange light, a brief pattern in energy, or a shape that seems to change as it moves, just as a 3-dimensional object passing through a flat sheet would appear as slices, first a point, then a line, then a shape. An organism from higher dimensions might pass through our space in pieces. We would see it only one slice at a time. Now imagine such a being living its normal life in a dimension we cannot enter. It might be as simple as a plant, or as complex as an intelligent creature. It would move through its own space easily, while we remain unaware of its presence. And yet, sometimes, by accident or natural motion, a part of it might overlap with our world for a moment. We might record this as a strange signal, a sudden burst of gravity, or a tiny shift in the path of a particle. To us, these events seem random, but to a higher dimensional being, they might be normal activities, like turning or growing or resting. It is important to stay calm and grounded here. We are not searching for magic or fantasy. We are exploring the possibility that life, like everything else, might take advantage of the full structure of the universe, not just the parts we can see. If dimensions are real, then they are part of nature. And if they are part of nature, life may have discovered them long before we even knew they existed. This idea also invites a gentle, humbling thought. We humans often believe that we understand the world well, but history shows that each time we learn more, the universe becomes bigger, stranger, and more beautiful. We once thought Earth was the center of everything. Then we learned it was only one planet among many. We once thought the stars were lights hung in the sky. Now we know they are suns, and many may have planets of their own. The idea of hidden dimensions is another step in this long journey, a doorway to something we cannot yet see, but might someday understand. If life exists in higher dimensions, then it has been here all along, sharing the universe with us, unseen, but not necessarily far away. It may be as close as a shadow to a hand, right beside us, but invisible without the right perspective. To understand how life might exist in hidden dimensions, we need to think about how life on Earth responds to its environment. Every creature, whether tiny or large, is shaped by the limits and opportunities of the space it lives in. Fish grow fins because water supports them. Birds grow wings because air allows them to fly. Even the cells in our bodies follow the rules set by the 3 dimensions we move through. Now imagine an environment with extra directions, paths that our bodies cannot use or even imagine. A being living there would grow and evolve in ways that make sense for that space. It might use a direction we can't see to move quickly. It might grow structures that curve into spaces our eyes cannot follow. To us, such a creature would look incomplete, as if parts of it appear and vanish, but in its own world, it would be whole and normal. A simple way to picture this is with a piece of paper and a pencil. If you draw a shape on the paper, it can only exist in 2 dimensions. But if you push your finger through the paper, the beings in that flat world would not see your full finger. They would only see the cross-section, the part of your finger that cuts through their space. It might look like a circle that suddenly appears, grows, shrinks, and disappears again. They would never know the true shape behind it. This is how a higher dimensional organism might look to us, not as a complete form, but as passing slices. A flash of light here, a small distortion there, a pattern that repeats without a clear source. Our world is like the paper. The higher world is the hand moving through it. Science already gives us hints that something like this could happen. Certain particles behave in ways that suggest they may be influenced by dimensions beyond our own. Some forces seem to leak into our universe from somewhere else, almost like a breeze felt through a small crack in a window. These ideas are still being studied, but they remind us that our universe might have hidden layers. If life exists in these higher layers, it would have abilities that seem impossible to us. It might move without traveling through space. It might appear in 2 places at once from our point of view. It might even pass through solid matter, not because it is a ghost, but because it can slide into a dimension where our solid walls do not exist. This does not mean such beings would be dangerous or even aware of us. Just as we are unaware of most animals living deep in the oceans, they might not know our dimension exists at all. Their senses and instincts would be tuned to their own environment, not to ours. They might be as peaceful, busy, or unconcerned as any life we know. And yet, if we ever detect clear signs of such life, it would change how we see everything. It would mean the universe is more alive and connected than we ever imagined. Not just stars and planets and galaxies, but layers upon layers of reality, with life-filling spaces we never knew were there. For now, we stand at the edge of understanding, much like early explorers who looked at the ocean without knowing what lived beneath. We see hints, small clues, but the full picture remains hidden, waiting for us to develop the right tools and the right perspective. To explore this idea further, imagine how limited our senses really are. Our eyes can see only a very small range of light. Our ears can hear only a narrow band of sound. Most of the universe is completely silent and invisible to us. We need special tools, telescopes, microscopes, detectors, to reveal what our bodies cannot sense. Every time we build a new kind of instrument, we discover something we never knew existed. For example, before microscopes, people had no idea that bacteria lived everywhere. They could only see the effects: illness, decay, fermentation, but not the tiny organisms causing them. It took new technology to uncover an entire world hiding in plain sight. The same may be true for life in higher dimensions. It might be all around us, but we cannot perceive it because we do not have the right microscope yet. Imagine a simple wave passing through water. A fish feels the wave, but it does not know what caused it. Now imagine a small gravitational wave passing through space. We can measure the wave with very sensitive instruments, but we still cannot always explain what produced it. Sometimes it could come from known events, like black holes colliding, but sometimes the source is less clear. These unexplained signals might be like the ripples in the fish's pond, hints of something moving in a place we cannot see. Another example is dark matter. We cannot see it, touch it, or detect it directly, but we know it is there because galaxies behave differently than they should. Something invisible is pulling on them. Many scientists think dark matter is made of unknown particles, but another possibility is that we are feeling the gravitational effects of structures that stretch partly into higher dimensions. If so, what we call dark matter might be the shadow of something real but hidden. If life existed in those hidden spaces, how would we notice it? We might see patterns in energy that repeat in strange ways. We might detect sudden changes in how particles move, or we might find tiny distortions in space that behave as if something passed through our world for a moment. None of these signs would look like life to us at first. They would look like puzzles, odd data points, small mysteries. But with time, we might begin to recognize them as traces of something alive. Think of how dolphins understand sound. They use echolocation, sending out clicks and listening for the echoes. To them, sound creates a map of their world. They can see with their ears in a way we cannot. If higher dimensional life has senses tuned to its own space, it might move with the same confidence, using cues and signals that are invisible to us. Meanwhile, we would remain unaware, like standing next to a dolphin without hearing its language. It is also possible that higher dimensional life does not even think of itself as hidden. From its perspective, its world is complete. It might not realize that our dimension sits beside it, just as we never think about the world of a flat drawing on a page. Two realities, both real, both full, but each unaware of the other, unless something creates a connection. And that leads to an important idea. If dimensions touch or overlap in certain places, these points could act like windows, small, rare openings where something in one dimension can affect another. These windows might be brief, fragile, and hard to find, but if life ever passed through one, even for a second, it could leave a sign that we might one day understand. To imagine how life might behave in higher dimensions, it helps to think about how creatures on Earth use the space available to them. A bird moves in 3 dimensions with ease. It can rise, fall, glide, and turn in any direction. A human can only walk along the ground and jump a little. A flat insect walking on a sheet of paper would never understand how a bird can disappear upward. It would think the bird simply vanished. Now picture a creature that lives in 4 or 5 dimensions. To us, It might seem to disappear, reappear, or pass through objects, not because it is magical, but because it is using directions we cannot follow. If it moved sideways into a higher dimension, our eyes would show nothing at all. If it came back, we would see a small part of its shape, then lose sight of it again. This is not science fiction. It is a natural extension of how space might work. If extra dimensions exist, then movement through them is simply normal to anything living there. Think about a simple example. If a two-dimensional creature lived on a sheet of paper, it would know only length and width. If you placed a sphere through the paper, the creature would see strange changes. First a point, then a growing circle, then a shrinking circle, and finally nothing. To us, this is easy to explain, but to the flat creature, it would be confusing and mysterious, like witnessing an object that grows from nothing and then fades away. So if a higher dimensional form of life ever passed through our space, we would see pieces of it, not the whole. A pulse of light, a sudden shape, a small distortion in the air, maybe even something that looks solid for a moment and then disappears. We would not understand what we were seeing because we would be looking at only one slice of a much larger form. But there is another side to this idea. Life in higher dimensions might rarely or accidentally overlap with ours. In their own world, they might move normally, unaware that parts of their body cross into our space from time to time. Just as we don't think about our shadow touching the ground, they might not think about their presence touching our dimension. To them, we might be as unnoticed as dust drifting in sunlight. If such life exists, it may not be technological or intelligent. It might be simple, like plants or basic organisms, taking shapes that follow the laws of their space. But it could also be complex. Intelligence might arise in higher dimensions the same way it did in ours, through long periods of adaptation and survival. Such beings might use directions and forces we do not know about, making their abilities feel impossible from our perspective. For example, a creature that naturally moves into a higher dimension could avoid obstacles easily. It could reach places we cannot reach. It could store information in ways that go beyond our understanding of space. It might even communicate using changes in dimensions themselves, signals that pass through matter as if it were not there. None of this means they would seek contact with us. They might not even be aware that our reality holds life at all. If you lived in a house with hidden rooms you never knew existed, you would never think about the people living inside them. Our two worlds could be separated not by distance, but by orientation, like two sheets of paper that touch without mixing. Still, the idea that life could exist just beyond our senses brings a quiet feeling of possibility. It suggests that the universe may be larger and more alive than we ever expected. And like explorers of the past who slowly mapped the globe, we may one day learn to sense and understand dimensions that are invisible to us today. To understand how life might form in higher dimensions, we need to think about how life began in our own world. Life started from simple ingredients, atoms, molecules, and energy. Over time, these ingredients combined in stable ways, creating patterns that could grow, change, and eventually reproduce. Life is, at its core, a stable pattern supported by the environment around it. Now imagine an environment with more directions to move in, more ways for energy to flow, and more room for patterns to form. In such a place, life could develop structures that we cannot picture. It might not use atoms the way we do. It might be built from different types of particles, or even from shapes formed in higher dimensional space. These shapes could hold energy, store information, or react to forces that we do not experience. A useful way to think about this is to imagine a simple knot in a rope. In 3 dimensions, the knot can hold its shape because space allows the rope to wrap around itself. But if you were to pull that rope into a 4th dimension, the knot could be undone instantly because the rope could move in a direction we cannot see. In a higher dimensional world, complex shapes could remain stable or unstable depending on how they twist through the extra dimensions. Life could use this property to build extremely flexible or complex bodies. Some scientists even think that what we call forces in our dimension might be the shadows of shapes or movements happening in higher ones. For example, gravity might be weak because it spreads through more dimensions than we can see. This idea suggests that the space around us is already shaped by higher dimensional activity. If that is true, then life might have formed in those dimensions long before Earth even existed. Imagine life that senses not light or sound, but the bending of space itself. Imagine creatures that navigate by feeling the curves of dimensions, the way birds sense the direction of the wind. Their awareness would be unlike ours. They would experience reality as a much richer world, with more pathways, more possibilities, and more forms of stability. If such beings exist, would they ever interact with us? It is possible, but their interactions might be accidental. A tiny part of their body might brush through our dimension like a finger touching the surface of water. We would see a quick effect, a burst of energy, a sudden shift in a particle, a brief glow. To them, it would mean nothing. To us, it might be a mystery we cannot explain. Life in higher dimensions could also evolve in unique ways. With more space to grow into, it might expand in shapes that seem impossible to us. Some beings might be huge, spreading through many layers of space. Others might be very small, living inside tiny folds of dimensions. Time might feel different to them too. A creature that spreads across multiple dimensions might experience time at a slower or faster rate than we do. We might see its actions as brief flashes or long, slow patterns. But even with these differences, the basic idea of life remains the same: patterns that survive. And in a larger, deeper universe, there is more room for such patterns to appear. If this kind of life exists, it could mean that our universe is not quiet or empty. Instead, it might be full of activity happening just beyond our reach, a hidden layer of existence where life follows rules we have not yet discovered. To understand how close higher dimensional life might be to us, imagine 2 sheets of paper lying on top of each other. They touch, but the creatures drawn on each sheet cannot see or interact with one another. They live side by side without knowing it. Our universe might be like one of those sheets. A second universe, or even many, could be pressed right against ours, separated only by dimensions we cannot enter. Some theories in physics say that our universe could be like a brain, a kind of surface floating in a larger space. Other brains might sit next to ours, each one holding its own version of matter, energy, and possibly life. If this is true, then the distance between us and another world might be far smaller than the thickness of a grain of sand. We just cannot step sideways into it. Now imagine a life form living on one of these nearby brains. It would know its own space, its own forces, and its own rules. To that life form, our universe would be invisible, just as theirs is invisible to us. But sometimes, the brains might move slightly or come very close. When that happens, a small part of one universe might affect the other, like two sheets touching in a way that lets a bit of ink pass through. This could look like unusual signals or small bursts of energy in our world. Scientists sometimes detect strange events that they cannot fully explain. These could be natural cosmic processes, or they could be tiny interactions between our dimension and another. Just like a fish feels ripples from the world above, we might be feeling ripples from a world beside ours. Another idea is that higher dimensional life might not be on separate brains at all. It could live in the same space we do, but use directions that we cannot sense. Think of two people standing back to back in a dark room. Without turning or speaking, they would never notice each other. They share the same location, but not the same point of view. Life in higher dimensions might share the same room as us, while remaining completely hidden. If this kind of life existed, what would it be aware of? It might see patterns in space that we cannot see. It might sense shapes that wrap into higher dimensions. We would be almost invisible to it, just as it is invisible to us. We might appear as thin, simple shapes, like flat shadows of our full form. A being like this might also travel in ways we find impossible. It could step into a higher dimension to avoid an obstacle, then return to its original space. This would look to us like teleportation. Or it could reach into a space behind the one we know, making it seem as though it passed through matter. These abilities sound extraordinary, but they are simply natural if more dimensions exist. Even so, this does not mean such life would try to contact us. It might have no reason to. It might not even have the senses needed to notice our world. Just as we cannot see ultraviolet patterns that bees see, higher dimensional life might sense things far beyond our imagination. To them, our universe might feel like a thin surface, a simple part of a much larger structure. But here is the interesting part. If dimensions ever shift or overlap just a little, it could allow a moment of connection, a place where two worlds briefly touch, a point where something in their dimension creates a signal in ours. These moments might be rare and tiny, but they could be the first hints that we are not alone, not just in space, but in the deeper structure of reality. To understand how we might someday detect higher dimensional life, we can look at how science has already revealed things once thought impossible to find. For most of human history, people could not see atoms, radio waves, or distant galaxies. These things were always there, but we needed better tools to notice them. The same may happen with hidden dimensions. We may need a new kind of instrument, a device that senses the shape of space itself. Our current tools measure things like light, heat, gravity, and particles. But if a creature lives in higher dimensions, it might not produce light or heat in the way we expect. Instead, it might bend space slightly, or cause tiny changes in energy that are easy for us to overlook. These changes might show up in experiments as small errors, strange readings, or signals we cannot match with any known cause. Scientists sometimes observe events like this. Tiny particles vanish and reappear, as if they jumped somewhere else for a moment. Energy seems to disappear in one place and appear in another. These events might have normal explanations, but they also fit the idea that something could be moving through a dimension we cannot see. Imagine a door that opens only for a fraction of a second, too fast for us to notice, but long enough for something to move through. In our world, we would only see the effect, a brief shift, a quick flash, or a small force acting on matter. To a higher dimensional creature, it would simply be passing by. If we want to find these signs, we need to learn what to look for. A good example comes from how we detect earthquakes. We cannot see the motion deep inside the earth, but we feel the waves that travel through the ground. In the same way, we might someday detect dimensional waves, movements in the fabric of reality caused by something alive in a higher space. Another clue could come from the way gravity behaves. Gravity is the only force that seems to spread out too thinly. It is far weaker than all the other forces, as if most of it is leaking into another dimension. If gravity can move into those hidden spaces, then maybe life can shape or use gravity in ways we do not yet understand. A creature living in higher dimensions might communicate or travel using gravity, the way we use sound or light. Picture a whale singing through the ocean. Its song travels far, reaching places the whale itself cannot see. If higher dimensional beings use something like that, a kind of gravity language, we might one day detect the patterns, even if we do not understand their meaning. What sounds to us like a strange signal might be normal communication to them. Of course, it is also possible that higher dimensional life leaves almost no trace at all. Some forms of life on Earth are incredibly quiet. Deep-sea microbes barely move or change. They live in darkness, unnoticed, for millions of years. If similar quiet life exists in higher dimensions, its signals might be so faint that we miss them completely. But even faint signals can become clear once we know how to search. The universe rarely hides its secrets forever. When people learned how to use radio waves, the sky suddenly came alive with signals. When we discovered X-rays, we saw structures inside stars that were invisible before. When we learn to sense the geometry of space, we may discover patterns that reveal life moving through areas we have never explored. And this leads to a simple but powerful thought. The universe may already be giving us hints. We just have not yet learned what those hints mean. Somewhere in the quiet noise of space, in the data we collect every day, there may be traces of something alive, something shaped by dimensions we cannot sense, but one day might understand. To imagine what higher dimensional life might be like, we can start by thinking about how life on Earth adapts to its environment. Every creature is shaped by the rules of the space it lives in. Fish swim because water allows it. Birds fly because air supports wings. Even insects use tiny air pockets and currents to stay balanced. Life and environment always evolve together. Now imagine an environment with more directions than ours. A world where a creature can move not just forward, backward, left, right, up and down, but also into a direction we have no name for. In such a place, life might develop abilities we cannot even picture. For example, think of how a bird uses the air to glide smoothly. A higher dimensional creature might glide through a dimension we cannot enter. To us, it would look like it appeared suddenly or vanished without moving. We would not see the full path, only the moments where it touches our space. A helpful comparison is the idea of a maze. In a flat, two-dimensional maze, a creature has to turn, twist, and search for exits. But if it could step into a third dimension, even for a moment, it could simply rise above the maze and come down on the other side. What looks difficult in 2 dimensions becomes simple in 3. In the same way, what looks impossible to us might be easy for a being that can use higher dimensions. Now imagine how these beings might sense their world. Humans rely heavily on sight. Birds sense magnetic fields. Sharks sense electrical signals. Bats use sound to see in the dark. Higher dimensional beings might sense the bending or twisting of space. They might detect shapes that stretch across multiple dimensions. Their awareness could be far broader than ours, giving them a view of reality that we cannot imagine. In their world, our 3-dimensional space might appear thin, like a fragile layer floating inside a much deeper structure. They might see us the way we see flat shadows, simple outlines of something more complex. But this does not mean they would understand us. A being that senses higher dimensions might find our signals, our movements, and our forms too limited to recognize as life. Our world might be a faint echo to them, a small part of a much larger environment. This raises an interesting possibility. Higher dimensional life might exist without ever knowing we are here. Even if our universes touch, the difference in perspective could be too large to bridge. Imagine holding a book. The pages touch each other, but the story on one page has no awareness of the story on the next. 2 worlds side by side, but separate. And yet, there might be rare moments when these worlds interact, a shift in dimensions, a ripple passing through, a small opening between layers of space. In such a moment, a creature might briefly cross into our world without intending to. We would see only a fragment, an energy pulse, a short distortion, a strange flash. Then it would be gone again. If this seems mysterious, remember that our own world has similar moments. Deep-sea animals sometimes drift to the surface by accident. Birds are blown off course by storms. Even on Earth, worlds overlap only briefly. So if higher dimensional creatures ever touch our space, it might be in the same accidental way, brief, unplanned, and difficult to understand. These ideas are not meant to frighten, but to expand our sense of possibility. The universe is wide and full of places we have never seen. If dimensions really stretch beyond the ones we know, then life might have found ways to fill them long before we learned they existed. To understand how higher dimensional life might interact with our world, imagine a simple situation: a hand passing through a still pool of water. The fish living in the pool do not see the hand. They only feel the water shift around them. They sense movement, pressure, and waves, but the hand itself remains invisible. To them, the disturbance is the event. To us, the hand is the cause. Our universe may behave in the same way. If something from a higher dimension moves near or through our space, we might detect only its effects: small changes in gravity, sudden bursts of energy, or unusual motions that do not fit our usual rules. These would look like tiny, unexplained events, but they might be the ripples of something larger moving nearby. One place where we already see strange effects is at the edges of black holes. Space stretches and bends in extreme ways, and some theories suggest that at these boundaries, dimensions might mix or fall together. If this is true, then higher dimensional life might travel near such places, using the strange geometry as a natural pathway. We cannot see them, but the way black holes behave could reveal clues that something else is interacting with space. Another clue comes from particles that sometimes behave unpredictably. In certain experiments, particles appear to vanish for a moment and then return. One idea is that they might be moving slightly into another dimension before coming back. If life in higher dimensions is made from similar particles, it might pass through our world in the same flickering way, here for a moment, gone the next, with no clear motion in between. But we must remember something important. Contact with higher dimensional life would not necessarily be dramatic. It might not involve bright lights or strange shapes. It could be subtle, quiet, a tiny shift in a magnetic field, a soft pulse of energy, a pattern that repeats in a way we cannot explain. Think of how animals communicate with signals we barely notice. Whales send low-frequency sounds across oceans. Bees use tiny vibrations to talk inside the hive. Elephants feel signals through the ground. Humans did not understand these forms of communication for thousands of years because we lacked the tools to detect them. Higher dimensional life might be sending signals of its own, carried through space in ways we cannot yet interpret. There is also the possibility that higher dimensional beings, if they are intelligent, might avoid crossing into our space. To them, our universe could be chaotic or unstable, just as we avoid deep-sea vents or extreme volcanic environments. They might avoid the parts of reality where dimensions are limited or squeezed tightly. Our world might feel cramped to them, the way a narrow cave feels to us. But even this does not rule out occasional contact. Nature is full of accidents, creatures drifting into areas they do not normally visit, currents carrying animals to new locations, storms pushing birds far from home. In the same way, higher dimensional beings might come close to our universe accidentally, not by intention, but by natural motion in their own space. If this ever happens, we would witness only a fraction of their form. A piece of their structure might overlap with our dimension, leaving a trace that our instruments could detect, a ripple in space, a brief energy signature, something that breaks the pattern of normal physics for a moment. We may not understand these signs right away, but one day, with better tools and a deeper understanding of dimensions, we might recognize them as the first hints of life beyond our three-dimensional view. To get closer to this idea, let's think about how life and intelligence develop. On Earth, intelligence appears when creatures must navigate complex environments. Dolphins, elephants, birds, and humans all live in worlds full of challenges, changing landscapes, shifting weather, moving prey, and social groups. The more complex the environment, the more complex the mind that survives in it. Now imagine a world with more dimensions than ours, a place where movement can unfold in directions we cannot imagine, where forces twist and bend in ways we never experience, where shapes and paths overlap in deeper patterns. In such a world, survival would require a kind of awareness far beyond what we know. A being growing there might learn to sense the structure of space itself, curves, folds, and invisible connections. Its intelligence would not be like ours. It might think using patterns in multiple dimensions at once. It might understand connections that we see as unrelated. Its thoughts could stretch across space the way a spider web stretches across branches, touching many points at once. Such a mind might solve problems by moving through dimensions, not by moving through physical space. If such beings exist, they might live in communities too, not physical gatherings, but networks of connections across several dimensions. They might meet by aligning parts of their structure in a shared space we cannot see. They might communicate by sending patterns through higher dimensions, like ripples spreading across a pond. To us, these communications could look like simple, repeating signals, tiny pulses in gravity or energy. But here is the important part. Their intelligence might be invisible to us, not because it is hidden, but because it is shaped by a world we cannot enter. A whale's song makes sense to another whale, but to us, it once sounded like random noise. A higher dimensional message might seem like static until we learn how to read it. Another question is whether such beings could ever become aware of us. They might sense the presence of our universe the way we sense the thin skin of a bubble. Something delicate, something separate. To them, our three-dimensional space might appear simple and limited. They might see us the way we see flat drawings, interesting, but not fully real. Or they might not sense us at all. A mind built for higher dimensions might simply overlook the smaller structures of our world. It would be like a person walking past a tiny ant without noticing its presence, not out of cruelty, but because their attention operates at a different scale. And yet, there is another possibility. A higher dimensional being might explore our universe out of curiosity, the same way we explore caves, oceans, or deep forests. They might study our world by touching it briefly, leaving small traces behind, not to harm or change anything, but to learn. If so, what would they find? They might see stars as thin lines of energy, planets as floating shells, and life as tiny clusters of movement. They might not recognize our intelligence, or they might recognize it instantly as a simple version of their own. What matters is that this idea opens a gentle door. Intelligence might not be limited to shapes and forms we understand. It might arise naturally, wherever space allows patterns to grow and survive, even in dimensions we do not yet know how to see. To imagine how higher dimensional life might move through the universe, think about how simple movement becomes when you add just one extra direction. A small insect crawling on a table must walk around a cup, but a human can lift the cup straight up, using the third dimension to escape the obstacle completely. What seems impossible in 2 dimensions becomes easy in 3. Now imagine a creature living in 4 or more dimensions. A solid wall in our world might not be a wall to them. They could simply move into another direction, one we cannot use, and pass right through. To them, our physical barriers might feel thin, like sheets of paper. What we call solid might not be solid at all from their perspective. This kind of movement could explain strange events we sometimes observe. A sudden shift in energy, a particle appearing where it should not, a brief distortion in space. These could be the shadows of higher dimensional motion, moments when something large in its own space brushes against ours. Think of how whales travel through the ocean. They glide through a 3-dimensional volume with ease, leaving trails of sound and pressure behind them. Smaller creatures feel those waves, but never see the whale itself. In the same way, higher dimensional life might pass through regions of our space, leaving ripples we detect as tiny gravitational waves or odd distortions in energy fields. These movements might not be intentional, just as we seldom think about the effects we leave behind in water or air. Higher dimensional beings mightn't even know their motion affects our universe. Our space could be like a thin layer they occasionally drift across without noticing. Now imagine how such beings might travel great distances. In our three-dimensional world, the space between stars is vast and quiet. But in higher dimensions, shortcuts might exist, paths that fold space or connect distant points more directly. A being able to use these dimensions could travel farther and faster than anything we can imagine. What looks like a journey of light years in our world might feel like a short step in theirs. This could mean that higher dimensional life, if it exists, might explore its universe freely. It might spread across regions that would take us millions of years to reach. It might not think of distance the same way we do. What we see as separate galaxies might appear connected to them through hidden directions in space. And yet, even with all this freedom, such beings might still be unaware of us. Imagine walking across a forest floor. You see the trees and the sky, but you rarely notice the tiny microorganisms living in the soil. Our universe might feel like that soil, a small, invisible layer inside something much larger. But here is the hopeful thought. Just as we eventually discovered the microscopic world, we might one day learn to detect the presence of higher dimensional motion. We might find patterns in gravitational waves or strange symmetries in particle behavior that point clearly to life beyond our dimensions. These signs might already be in our data, waiting for the right understanding to reveal them. The universe is full of hidden paths, and life, whatever form it takes, tends to explore every space it can. If higher dimensions exist, then it is possible, quietly and logically, that life has already grown and moved within them. As we move closer to the heart of this idea, it becomes clear that higher dimensional life would not simply be strange versions of creatures we already know. Their entire reality would be built from rules, shapes, and motions that do not exist in our world. To understand this, imagine how a two-dimensional creature might misunderstand our universe. It could never imagine a mountain because mountains rise upward into a direction it cannot see. It could never imagine a sphere because it knows only circles and lines. In the same way, we may be blind to the true forms of life shaped by higher dimensions. We look for familiar patterns, eyes, limbs, movement, sound, but these are all adaptations to our three-dimensional space. A higher dimensional organism might not have a body in any sense we recognize. It might be a pattern of energy stretched across several dimensions. It might change shape naturally as it moves. It might not have a single fixed form at all. This can be compared to a cloud of fireflies in the night. From one angle, it looks like a shifting shape. From another, it disappears entirely. The shape is real, but it depends on how you view it. Higher dimensional beings might look like this to us, visible only in small, shifting pieces. Now consider how such life might grow. On Earth, growth follows the rules of chemistry and physics in 3 dimensions. But in higher dimensions, new types of stability become possible. Patterns might join together in ways no molecule can. Structures might fold through multiple dimensions, creating forms that can store energy or information far more efficiently than our biology allows. A higher dimensional creature's body might be able to pass through itself without harm. It might split into multiple paths and rejoin later. It might exist in several places at once, not because it is magical, but because its shape extends through extra directions of space. To us, these abilities would seem impossible. To them, they would simply be normal. If such beings have intelligence, their thoughts would also stretch through dimensions. They might process information in ways we cannot imagine. Patterns unfolding in 4 or 5 directions instead of only 3. Their memories might be stored in the structure of space itself. Their sense of time might be different as well. They could experience moments as layers, not as a single line. What feels long to us might feel brief to them. What seems instant to us might seem stretched out. This means that communication between our worlds, if it ever happened, might be extremely difficult. We might not recognize their signals as communication at all. They might not recognize ours. Imagine trying to explain sound to a creature that has no ears, or light to a creature with no eyes. Even if they tried to communicate, we might not understand the form their message takes. But if contact ever becomes possible, it might come from patterns rather than words, a repeating signal that breaks the rules of our physics, a structure in space that holds itself together for no known reason, a rhythm in gravitational waves that suggests intention behind the motion. These would be signs not of accident, but of intelligence working in a deeper layer of the universe. Yet even with these possibilities, there is something peaceful in the idea. Higher dimensional life does not have to be frightening or threatening. Like most life on Earth, it might simply be doing what life always does, existing, growing, exploring, and adapting to the space it inhabits. We may be unaware of it, and it may be unaware of us, but we share the same universe in different ways. The more we learn about the cosmos, the clearer it becomes that our world is not the full picture. What we see is only one slice of something wider, and life, wherever it appears, is shaped by that wider structure, whether we can see it or not. As we reach the final part of this journey, let's bring the idea into a calm, simple perspective. Higher dimensional life is not meant to be imagined as strange monsters or unreachable gods. It is simply life shaped by a different kind of space, just as our own bodies are shaped by the familiar directions of length, width, and height. If hidden dimensions exist, then they are part of the same universe we live in. They are as natural as the wind or the ocean. Life growing in those dimensions would be following the same quiet rule that guides all life. Adapt to what is around you. Imagine standing again in that quiet field at night, the same one we began with. The stars look calm and far away. The air is still. Nothing seems unusual. Yet now the thought is different. The darkness above you is no longer empty. You can imagine layers of space folded beyond sight. You can imagine life moving gently through dimensions you cannot enter, leaving tiny hints, a shift here, a pattern there, that one day we might understand. And maybe, just as the fish in the pond never knows the world above the water, we too are living inside a larger reality. We sense only the ripples, not the full shape of what moves beyond our view. But that does not make the fish's world any less real, and it does not make ours less meaningful. It only means there's more to the universe than we can currently see. Higher dimensional life, if it exists, may be peaceful, slow, and unaware of us. Or it may be curious and intelligent, exploring the structure of space as naturally as birds explore the sky. It might pass near our world without noticing. It might leave traces in the form of distant gravitational waves, quiet bursts of energy, or patterns in matter that puzzle our scientists. For now, these signs sit at the edge of our understanding, soft footsteps in another room, heard only faintly through the walls. One day, our tools may become sensitive enough to detect these footsteps clearly. We may learn to read the geometry of space the way we read light from stars. We may find patterns that show life adapting to hidden dimensions, thriving in worlds we never knew existed. When that day comes, our view of the universe will expand once again, just as it did when we discovered new continents, new planets, and new forms of life. But even if that day is far away, the idea brings a gentle comfort. It reminds us that the universe is not limited to what we can see. It is wider, deeper, and full of possibilities. Life may be growing in places we cannot reach, living peacefully in dimensions we have not unlocked. We are part of a much larger story, one that stretches beyond our senses, beyond our understanding, and beyond the three-dimensional world we call home. In the quiet of the night, it is enough to imagine that we are not alone, not just in the sense of other planets or distant galaxies, but in the deeper sense that life may be hidden all around us, woven into the very shape of space. The mystery is gentle, not frightening. It is a reminder that reality is bigger than our eyes can show. And as we continue to explore, to learn, and to build better tools, we may one day open a window into these hidden dimensions. When that happens, we will not only discover new forms of life, we will discover new parts of ourselves and a richer, more connected universe than we ever dreamed.